Any questions as of now? Okay. Oh, good enough. Okay. Now, the moment I say policy, what is a policy? Why do we have to use the policies? What what comes into your mind? Your company's policy. It is against to my company's policy. If you're trying to get the refund from any of the organization, for example, you made some insurance money or you have paid some additional payment towards your internet connection and you're expecting the money to be returned, and you will get a reply simply like, what, there's a company policy, we will not be able to return that. uh, your internet activation could be extended for further more 3 months or further one more month, like that you will get it. So the company policy is nothing but a set of conditions, a set of rules with which they can operate with, right? The same way the policies on firewalls, the heart of the firewall, right? So basically what happens, if you have, what is that called, you have a firewall, multiple interfaces are there. We have seen some basic requirements, right? What is that basic requirement? Layer 2 layer 3 forwarding, basic filtering, address translation, VPN. Those are all the basic requirements for a device to be called a security device. Hope you guys remember. By the way, yesterday I have uploaded all the videos and then I have shared the link also. Okay, if you wanted to have some kind of a revision, please have a look at it. Okay. Sorry? I just shared in YouTube because over a period of time I'll remove them. So I'll keep it as long as you want. I'll make it as a private, ma. It cannot be sent for. It cannot be kept on public, right? If you want later, I will share the link. You do it. If you want, you can do it. Okay. See, those are all the basic requirements of. Was there a question? I'm hearing some sound. Did I answer your questions, or still some questions are there? Oh, so we have seen that some basic requirements of a security device, which means what, layer 2 to layer 3 forwarding, right? While the traffic is flowing between the interfaces, right? So that's where my intelligence comes into picture. Now, basically, I say that I'm going to be having this interfaces connected to my brain. Like, think your interfaces as your hands and legs. You cannot move your hands and legs while the brain is dead, right? So this brain is going to be having the complete intelligence on whether the received packet can be permitted to pass through or not. So this is where the firewall's intelligence comes into picture. Now, firewall has brain. I'm not denying it. Every human has brain. Every living being has brain. But what is the level of knowledge they have is purely dependent on their experiences, the books they read, the incidents they have gone through. Why companies are recruiting experienced people? That experience is going to be feeding some knowledge. So if that kind of a situation comes into picture, they would be in a better way of acting or responding for those incidents. That's why companies are expecting experienced people. So that experience is going to be the knowledge. So I have a firewall. The firewall is capable of doing the filtering, but what needs to be filtered, how it has to be filtered, it is not aware of it. So as an administrator, we have to feed in those information to the firewall so that the firewall's knowledge gets enhanced. Based on the knowledge, the traffic can be filtered out. Now, how we will be feeding that information, like this has to be permitted, this has to be denied, that is where the policies comes into picture. So policies are nothing but the set of rules with which the firewall can differentiate the traffic needs to be permitted to pass through or the traffic needs to be denied. That's the basic thing. Now, so in Cisco's terminology, the policies are nothing but an access control list. In access control list, we will be having something called as what? ACE. ACE is nothing but access control element. every rule which is part of an access control list is called as access control element. So we say that policies as a collection of rules. The correct terminology within Cisco, we call it as ACL, access control list. Every rule is going to be identified as access control element. Now, why we are saying that a set of rules? So we might have different set of requirements. I think somebody is joining. Maybe Robin. Yes, Robin is joining. What, Robin, slept, huh? Sorry? Oh, okay. Okay. So why do we have more number of rules? So with a rule, what is that you can do is you will be able to identify certain traffic, right? So with a single rule, you will not be able to configure the complete, or you will not be able to pass the complete set of instructions to the firewall, what traffic can be permitted and what traffic can be denied. So we need to have different conditions, different scenarios, right? So for that, we have to create, we will be start creating multiple rules. Every rule is responsible for doing certain activity, or every rule is responsible for permitting certain traffic or denying certain traffic. When you have multiple rules, how they are going to be used for evaluation? In sequential order. So we have rules which are having certain sequence numbers associated to it. So whenever the traffic is received on any of the interfaces, what basically happens on it is the received packet will be verified against something called as a sanity check. The sanity check is nothing but the received frame or the received packet is genuine with respect to size, CRC error, checksum errors, those kind of a verification. At the same time, certain kind of attacks and certain types of attacks are going to be checked at the interface level, where not much of intelligence or the brain is going to be required. Like your DOS attacks, they are going to be basically inspected at the interface level. Your ICMP flood attacks, those attacks are going to be verified on the interface level. So when the traffic is entering on the interface, after it has passed your sanity check, then the firewall, because it is a stateful inspection firewall, it has the ability of checking whether the received packet is part of an existing connection or not. If the received packet is part of an existing connection, according to that information, the traffic will be allowed or denied. Of course, the traffic is going to be handled. So the packet has been received on an interface. First check will be done by the firewall is the received packet is part of an existing connection or not. If the received packet is part of an existing connection, then accordingly the traffic is going to be handled. If not, that means it is being considered as a new packet, a new connection request. By that time, the firewall needs to look into the policies whether this packet is matching against any of my rules or not, right? So while I'm doing that evaluation, and the evaluation of the rules against the received packet is going to be in sequential order. If the first rule itself is matching, whatever the action associated to that particular rule is going to be executed. Assuming that the first rule is not matching, then immediately the second rule is going to be used for matching the received traffic. See, like this, the sequential matching is going to be happening until first match found. Assume that no rule is matching against the received packet, and then there will be something called as what? An implicit deny action. A typical access control list is what I'm saying. Assuming that one of the rule is matched and the traffic needs to be permitted to pass through, what firewall will do is, before the traffic can be sent out via an interface, it makes an entry in the state table. So we know that, right? The state table is going to be maintaining the state of the connection, and you will have a bidirectional entry information. That means what request is permitted and what would be the response we are expecting. So both the set of informations are going to be stored in the connection table. Because of that, when the return traffic is received on the other interface, it would be matching the return traffic entry. So the traffic is going to be permitted to pass through without matching the traffic against the set of rules what we have. Is this clear as of now? Any questions? Any questions? Yes, please. Yes, yes, yes. Sanity check is common on all of the packets. Regardless, sorry. Interface level attacks verification parameters are there. And those are all also going to be verified. Put together, we call it as a sanity. Like the genuine frame size, CRC errors, runt, joins, all of them are going to be at the interface level. And that's why you are in a position to see the statistics of that information while we are issuing the show interface command. And those statistical information will not be available on your policy status or connection table details. They will not be there. Right? Any other questions? So these policies are going to be, yes. Hello. Okay. I keep hearing some noise. We'll come to that. We'll come to that. We'll come to that. I'm just trying to explain you the policies part first, and then we'll go for it. Okay? Now, we are trying to understand the purpose of keeping the rules at their appropriate place. So, one of the significant information that we are understanding from the rule evaluation methodology, that the rules are going to be used for matching the traffic, and they are going to be evaluated against the received packet in a sequential order, right? So position of the rules inside your rule base is playing a very vital role with respect to traffic filtering. So which rule has to be kept on top, means which rule has to be kept on bottom, or which rule can be in this position. May I know who's that? I keep hearing some noise. Okay, Ranita, can you please mute yourself, and whenever you wanted to ask a question, please you unmute and then you can ask me the question. Yeah, so right, so what we understood is the sequential order evaluation. Now let's try to understand something else now. What is that? What are all the components of a rule? So we understood what is a policy, which is made up of rules, and what are all the components you can see within a rule. Now every rule has three components. So the first component is called as identification component. Okay. The second component is called as an action component. The third component is called as an optional component. Every rule has these components. Okay. So the identification component is going to be used to match against the received packet. So the packet is going to be having certain set of information on the header, right? So how come we are saying that this packet is matching against this rule or not? That is where the identification component comes into picture. Now the identification component is going to be having multiple fields, like I can identify the packets based on their source, based on the destination, based on the service. So when I say based on the source the traffic is going to be identified, this can be an individual IP address, can be a subnet, can be a network. Same way, the destination can be an individual IP address, can be a subnet, can be a network. The services are typically like the port numbers. Like, how do we identify the service called as HTTP? What is the port number for HTTP? Sure, huh? Anybody wanted to change? Is this correct? Okay. What is the port number for Telnet? Okay. Is this correct? Okay, one more question. What is the port number for DNS? Okay. I would agree only for this. Of course, who me to agree? That's a different story. But in this discussion, I'm agreeing only for DNS. The port number what you have said for DNS is correct. HTTP and Telnet, the port number what you have given is not correct. Do anybody wanted to initiate an argument? Or would you like to correct something? Exactly. While you are writing the rules, you will simply write the port number. And one more thing is, when you say a port number simply 80, you have TCP 80 and you also have UDP 80. Am I right? So what you are saying, if it is TCP 80, then it is HTTP. If the port number is UDP 80, it is not meant for HTTP traffic. You understand what I'm saying? So HTTP is not simply 80, it is supposed to be TCP 80. Same way, Telnet is TCP 23. When it comes to DNS, we agreed for 53. Why we agreed? Because TCP 53 is also for DNS. UDP 53 is also meant for DNS only, but for different purpose or different functionality. TCP 53 is meant for zone file transfer, whereas UDP 53 is meant for name resolution. Anyway, both of the functionalities are part of DNS only. So for different kind of work or different functionalities within the DNS, we have different port number for it. Okay, like if you take a radius or TACACS, are we aware of radius and TACACS? Now, so both of them are offering AAA services, correct? Authentication, authorization, and accounting. So what is the port number used by radius, and what is the port number used by TACACS Plus? Which one, radius or TACACS? Okay. How about TACACS? Okay. Okay. The one correction is it is not TCP, it is UDP. So basically, the first authentication and authorization is going to be done on UDP 12, and accounting is running on 1813. The accounting service is listening on 1813. Authentication and authorization services are listening on 1812 of UDP. When it comes to TACACS Plus, the key difference it is TCP, and the port number is TCP 49. Okay, my point is, see, more than one service, authentication and authorization, can listen on the same port number. At the same time, a different service of the same application could listen on a different port number altogether. First of all, radius uses UDP 1645 and 1646. Okay, keep that in mind. An enhancement to radius are done, so we were calling it as a diameter. So diameter was using 1812 and 1813 of UDP, but you can use the term radius interchangeably to identify radius as well as diameter. So new version of radius is diameter. Okay, so that uses a port number UDP 1812 and 1813. The old radius uses a port number UDP 1645 and 1646. Now why I'm saying this one, when I say DNS, it's an application, a service which could offer different functionalities. So one of the functionality, which is called as a zone file transfer, is listening or running on TCP 53, whereas name resolution is running on UDP 53. So that's why when I simply asked DNS, specifying a port number simply as 53 is correct. But if the question asked is DNS name resolution service, then you cannot say 53. You have to say UDP 53. Does that make sense? Okay. Now the source can be an individual IP, can be a subnet, can be a network. The same way destination can be an IP, can be a subnet, can also be a network. But services are going to be based out of the port numbers and the protocol, the carrier. Now, it is quite possible multiple objects could also be referred as part of a single rule. You can do that one. Anyway, so the identification is going to happen based on the source, destination, and the service. So, source, destination, and the service. And this is what the first generations. So, let me take again identification of traffic is going to happen source, destination, and service. Now we have something called as what? Let's say source, an individual IP, could be a subnet, could be a network, a major network, right? Same way the destination could also be an individual IP, could be a subnet, could also be a major network. Services are going to be the protocol plus port number. This is how we were identifying in first generation firewalls. When it comes to next generation firewall, they have introduced some additional parameters with respect to identifying the traffic. So the first thing, we used to call it as what? A user ID. Recollect our the different types of firewall filtering technologies discussion. We were talking about packet filter, we were talking about proxy firewall, stateful inspection firewall. We have also introduced something called as what? A next generation firewall. So the next generation firewalls are capable of identifying the traffic using some additional parameters as well. For example, if I'm going to be using something called as user identification, it's not that user ID. User ID is a specific terminology. We use it inside your Palo Alto. I heard a couple of people are working on Palo Alto, right? So that's why I'm using the specific terminology here. User ID is nothing but the firewall is capable of identifying the user who initiated the traffic, regardless of the IP, subnet, or network. The firewall also has the ability of querying which user has initiated this packet. That is possible. We can track down because nowadays it has become very mobile. What do you mean by that mobile? So the users are traveling across the offices. So today the user might be sitting in Bangalore office, tomorrow he might be sitting in Chennai office, or he might be traveling to a different country. He might start working on it. Because he will be carrying his own laptop, the laptop is going to be installed with the set of tools according to the role of the employee within the organization. So obviously he is going to be traveling with his own laptop. So today he might be connecting from Bangalore, which will be in a different IP segment, and tomorrow as he is traveling to a different location, his IP segment may vary. So just by identifying the traffic using an IP address is not going to be helping you, because now we wanted to permit the traffic based on the user as well, right? So that's where the user identification comes into picture. The same way, the next generation firewalls are capable of identifying the applications as well. What do you mean by these applications? Basically, now, I think even the same information I have given you, given in the basic filtering technologies discussion. So, any application in current scenario, Web 2.0 and on, any application could be webified, which means what? You no need to have a dedicated client software to be installed on your device to access that application. You can simply use a browser and you can use the protocol called as HTTP or HTTPS to access any of the application. In this case, if I'm going to be identifying the traffic purely based on the port number, it will be very difficult, because we wanted to identify the application that could be permitted or denied. So the next generation firewalls are capable of identifying what application traffic is traveling through this port number. We would be in a position to identify it. Same way, there is also, you can filter the traffic based on the content as well. So your first generation firewalls are limited with the identification fields, identifying the traffic based on source, destination, service. The source can be IP, subnet, or network. The destination can be IP, subnet, or network, whereas the service is going to be protocol and port number. So with the help of next generation firewall, the filtering or matching traffic could be further enhanced. Like what? I can identify the traffic from which user the traffic has been initiated, to which application it is meant for, not simply using the port number. I can also do the filtering based on the content as well. That is possible on the next generation firewall. So we know that ASA is a first generation firewall. But of course, if you wanted to have these additional functionalities like this user and you wanted to identify from which location the user is connecting, right? How the user got connected, wired or wireless, using what device the user got connected. It's a company given laptop. What is the status of that device? That's where we take the help of what? The ICE. It's a product from your Cisco, which stands for what? Identity Services Engine. You have two different components integrated into it. CSACS, then NAC. We had two different products earlier. One is called the CSACS, Cisco Secure Access Control Server, and NAC, which is Network Admission Control. They combined both the devices, both the functionalities into a single appliance, which is called as Identity Services Engine. That means basically it has the ability of doing more functionalities. Like earlier we used to have a PIX and then a VPN concentrator. So PIX provides a firewall functionality, VPN provides the VPN functionalities. Now all of them are combined into what? ASA. Now after the acquisition of SourceFire, we have included that firepower services into your ASA. So now ASA plus firepower together, we are calling it as what? A next generation firewall. Is this clear? Any questions as of now? Sorry? See, ICE is a service. You can make use of integrating that with ASA to provide additional functionalities like the location of the user, what device the user is using, what is the current status of the device, like you have an antivirus installed or not, you have a latest signature update or not, when was the last antivirus scan done, what was the result. You can identify all of them through the help of ICE. So ICE is a combination of two different products from Cisco, which is called the CSACS and NAC. I just compared this functionality with Cisco ASA. Now earlier we had a separate device for firewall functionalities and various VPN options could be available with VPN concentrator. Now, so we have integrated all the types of VPNs like your IPsec VPN, SSL VPN into your firewall. Then we started naming it as ASA. But still, it is not a next generation firewall. So after the acquisition of a company called as a SourceFire, Cisco got a solution called as Firepower. That Firepower has been integrated into your ASA, then it had become a next generation firewall. So next generation firewalls are capable of doing stateful inspection, user ID based inspection, application identification, and content identification. So if you have a simple ASA, it is a first generation firewall. If you have the firepower services integrated with your ASA, then it is next generation firewall. Is that clear? Okay. Now, so the first component is the identification component we have seen. Then the second component is going to be the action component. Basically, a typical firewall would have minimum of two actions. One is going to be permit. The second action is going to be deny. These are all the typical actions. Depending on the type of firewall, if you go to the firepower, you still have various other options when it comes to actions. Now, our focus is very limited to ASA. That's why I'm just mentioning two actions like permit and deny. When I say permit, that means if the identification component is matching against the received traffic, then the action component which is associated to the rule is going to be executed. The action can be permit or deny. If I say permit, the identified traffic is going to be permitted. If I say deny, the identified traffic is going to be denied. Right? So, is there any possible additional actions in other firewalls? Yes, you have them. You also have something called as reject. You also have something called as tunnel. You also have something called as trust. There are many actions are available depending on the firewall on which you are going to be working on it. Okay, that's the action component, which is second component of a rule. So identification and action, these are all the two components we had the discussion. The third component is called as optional component. Okay, then the optional component, as the name suggests, the component itself is option. Whether you want to use it or not, it's up to you. So one of such component in your optional component is called as a log. That means whenever you are matching the traffic, the action associated to the rule is going to be executed. But if you want to track the information of the traffic, what traffic has been permitted or what traffic has been denied, you will be in a position to enable the log. The moment you enable the log, the details of the packets which is matched against that rule. So the log is going to be very specific to each and every rule. So don't enable the log for each and every rule. Instead, whichever the traffic you believe that the details of the traffic needs to be collected, try enabling log. It's an optional parameter. Okay. Then there is also another optional parameter which is called as a time component. Now, what is the time component? See, typically we used to enable or disable the rule. So the rules are there inside the policy. We can enable the rule or we can disable the rule. We know that when you have the policies, when you have the rules, they are going to be matched in the sequential order, right? And if you have the rule, that is going to be used. If you don't want a rule to be used for matching the traffic, simply delete it. Okay. So can I remove any of the rules just like that without thinking of anything else? See, I have hundreds of rules. I feel that why this rule is there, let me remove it. Can I remove it? Obviously no. Even according to your observation, if you are planning to remove the rule, you feel that this rule is of no use, you cannot remove the rule, you open up a ticket, right? So there will be a set of questionnaires as well, right? So your observation and you believe that this rule is of no use, and then there will be a set of questions from the approver as well. Why this rule needs to be removed? You have given the explanation. When you are planning to do, what is the backup plan for this? See, you believe that this rule is not doing anything, but probably that rule could do something. Now, after you remove the rule, and you see that some of the issues within your organization, then you may need to keep that rule again. So instead of removing the rule simply from your rule basis, disable the rule. When the rule is being disabled, even though the rule is there inside the policy, that rule will not be used for evaluation. Okay. Now my point is, this rule activation and deactivation, or enabling this rule or disabling the rule, can be based on the time. Can be based on the day and time. We can say that. So earlier days we used to have a different scenario, right? So people used to spend, the employees used to spend a lot of time in accessing the internet, browsing to the internet. So the company felt that it is not productive, right? So the employees are wasting their time from the organization's perspective. Now what they did is, all of a sudden they blocked the internet. That has created a negative impact. Later on, they felt that, okay, we will give you the internet, but not throughout the day. Instead, I'm going to be restricting the internet on a specific time of a day. Maybe until 9 o'clock. If you're coming by 8 o'clock, until 9 o'clock, you can access the internet. Same way, during the lunchtime, I can give you internet. After the office hours, I can give you the internet, just to increase the productivity. Now, my point is, if you wanted to allow internet on a specific period of time, you may need to enable the rule. Means, first of all, you create the rule, enable the rule on a specific time, and then disable the rule on a specific time. So by 1 o'clock, I wanted to enable the internet, I will enable the rule, and then by 2 o'clock, I'll be disable the rule so that no internet access will be there. So on the assumption that, so people will go for lunch on time, and they will finish the lunch and they'll come back. Right, they'll come back faster and they'll start browsing it exactly by 2 o'clock. When I disable, people will not be having internet. Anyway, they are on the desk, right? Anyway, they are on the desk. So what happens now? So anyway, they are on the desk. They will start doing their work. That's the understanding. I'm just trying to get it. But how this is going to be achieved? Exactly by 1 o'clock, the administrator needs to activate it. Exactly by 2 o'clock, he has to disable, or he has to remove the rule or disable it. It is a manual job, right? But we can associate a time object to the rule. According to the time, the rule gets activated and deactivated. We call this as a scheduled rule or timed access list. What are all the types of access lists you are aware of on Cisco IOS routers? Can you please tell me? Of course, you know standard, you know extended, you have numbered, you have named. Anything else? Just now I told you, right? Timed access list. Reflexive. Anything else? Lock and key, right? Even your CBAC is an access control list, right? Even cut through proxy, we used to call it as what? Cut through proxy. While the traffic is flowing through the device, we are going to be intercepting the traffic and validating the user credentials. Now, I'm just focusing on this part. What is that? Timed access list. You can create a time object, and that can be associated to the rule. Depending on the time defined inside the object, the rule can be activated or deactivated. Is that clear? And the most important optional component is comment. Okay, before I get into the comment, let me give you the result of this. Okay, so earlier days we used to have the internet access on a specific time of a day, right? During the lunch time, morning 8 to 9, or after 5 to 6, after 5, we will give the internet access. But people are a little bit smart enough, right? Think what would have happened. So because you have internet access between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock, people started going for the lunch either by 12 o'clock or after 2 o'clock. The purpose of this is different, but what the outcome of that could be different. But that's a different story altogether. Anyway, so comment is also one of the optional field, which would say that this is going to be considered as a lifesaver for any administrator. Now, as a security administrator or a firewall administrator of an organization, you are responsible for doing the changes, but you may not be the requester or you may not be the approver. Assume that I'm an employee of an organization, you are a firewall administrator. I want an application access. Now, what I have to do, I'll open up a ticket. So, in this case, who is the requester? Not you. I'm the requester. I'm just an employee, not a firewall administrator. I opened up a case. Now, this ticket will go to the relevant person. They will evaluate why this application access is required. There will be a set of communication between me and my approver, right? Of course, as a firewall administrator, you might also be the part of this ticket, right? So, once the approver convinced with the request and he is approving it, okay. Now, as a firewall administrator, you will transform that request in the form of configurations on the firewall. But when it comes to the firewall audit or IT audit, right, the information technology security audit, when it comes to this kind of an audit, who will be asked, who will be questioned? You are the end user. The auditor may not be aware of who requested, who approved and all. He has seen some changes on the firewall. Immediately, who's responsible for the firewall? You. So the questions are going to be targeting you. Why did you add this rule, or why did you modify this rule? Why did you remove anything? So this kind of a queries are going to be given to you, and the audit may happen once in a year externally, of course every quarter or every month, depending on the policy. Internal audit can also happen. But my question is, when we don't remember what we took for our breakfast last Monday or Tuesday, I don't know, I don't remember. Anybody, you remember what you had for your breakfast on last Monday, not yesterday, last Monday? Anybody do remember? Probably a couple of you people, but I don't remember it. Now, when I cannot remember certain basic things, then how do I remember? Because every day we might be involved in different activities, right? Now, how do we remember why this change happened? So that is where the comment sections are going to be helpful, where I will put the ticket number. So every change on that rule, it is going to be purely based on the ticket. I will keep adding the ticket number. When IT audit or firewall audit is going on, an auditor is asking that, okay, why did you do this? Oh, there is a ticket. I no need to ask the question. I'll go to the ticket and I'll check it out. You understand? So that's the purpose of having this comment. So we know three components within the rule. What is that? Identification component, action component, and option component. As the name suggests, option components are optional. You want to use it, use it. If you don't want to use it, don't use it. It's up to you. But the first two components, identification and action, are mandatory. Is that clear? Okay, now let me connect to my Eve. guy is on, huh? I did it. Okay. Right. So first of all, let me check it out. Yeah, the IP addresses have been configured according to our yesterday's topology. Remember, my Ethernet 0 is my internal network. This is 10.1.2.1. Same way, Ethernet 1 is my DMZ, which is connecting to my R2 router, and then I have Ethernet 2, which is connecting to the outside. I'm also seeing the security levels of it. I also verified that the routing table has the complete set of information to reach the internal network as well. Okay, my point here is, whatever the access that I'm going to be initiating from my internal network, see, my Windows machine is my internal network, it's going to be received. Any traffic initiated by this Windows machine, assuming that it is going to DMZ or external network, it will be received on Ethernet 0. My Ethernet 0 is my inside interface. Sorry. Yeah, it's an inside interface which has a security level of 100. Whether the traffic goes to DMZ, which has a security level of 50, or goes to my outside interface, which has a security level of 0, will be permitted. Why do I have to create the policy or the configure the policy from internal to DMZ or from inside to outside? Why would I create it? Do I have to configure any policies? Okay, I hear both the answer, no and yes. Okay, let me ask, why we have to configure the policy when everything is permitted? But still, why do you have to create the policy from inside to outside? That is my question. Not from outside to inside. Outside to inside is different scenario altogether. You're getting my point, right? Okay. Anybody else wanted to deviate from this? Okay, I don't agree for that. Exactly. Exactly. What you're saying is 100% correct. Think about our day one's discussion or day two's discussion. Internet is going to be considered as the origin of attacks. You remember? But nobody is directly connected or sitting on internet. Everybody is connected to internet. Now, so all of the organizations, if they do only inbound filtering, all outbound traffic is going to be permitted. Because of that, the attacks initiated by an internal user could also be permitted to pass through. By default, all traffic from higher security level to lower security level is permitted. So we have to restrict them. What traffic can be permitted? For that, we need to have the policies. Now, think about this. Let's say I have a firewall. Okay. I have the security level of 100, and the other side I have a security level of 0. Now I create the policy and then bind the access control list on this interface. The moment I bind the access list on that interface, the significance of security level on that interface is gone. You understand what I'm saying? When there is no policy, the security level comes into picture. When there is a policy, there is no significance of security level. You're losing that significance. So the moment I bind an access control list to the interface, according to the access list, the traffic may be permitted or denied. So there is no point in talking about security level. Is that clear? Or still any clarity is required? Only on that interface security level is gone. Right? So any traffic going to DMZ, do I have to worry about 100 to 50? No. On the other side, when the traffic is coming in, this interface is not associated with any access list. So the significance of security levels are there. So now 0 to 100, do I have to permit? No. When there is no access list, only then the security levels are going to be considered. When there is no access control list, the security levels are considered. When the moment you bind an access list on that interface, looking into the security level feature is gone. Yes. Mm. Okay, let's say 1, 2, 3, like that 10 people are there. Okay, you have created an access list. Mm. Okay, you created an access list from 1, 2, 3 to internet traffic is not allowed. Mm. This access list bound to this interface. How do you do that? Because the moment you bind this access list to the interface will not process the traffic according to the security level. So you have to create one more rule, permit all. Without this rule, what happens? Hello? See, if you don't have this rule, and you have one rule which is denying the traffic, and that interface lost the significance of security levels, now if the traffic is matching the rule, the traffic will be permitted. If it is not matching the rule, the implicit deny will drop the traffic. Okay. Okay. Now, so from higher security level to lower security level, we will still configure the policy to restrict the traffic. We wanted to have restrictive access. I don't want to allow everything. Whereas from external to internal, by default, no traffic can be permitted to pass through. So we have to configure the policies to permit the same. Is that clear? Okay, so now before I do anything, let me go to the internal PC. Where is my PC? Yeah, from internal PC. Let me check it out. I'm able to take the telnet access to (22.16.1.2). Let me do this one. Okay. I don't have the telnet application. You remember that, right? Let me create a new session, telnet session with 172.16.1.2. You remember yesterday's topology? See, I'm able to access. But if you go and check it out, the ASA, there wouldn't be any policies on that. This access list is there, but we didn't attach this one. Did we attach it? Okay, let's do this one. Clear configure access list. What this command will do? Okay, but if I say the specific access list number, what will happen? No, check it out. So we have the access list number 100. I gave this command, then check it out, show access list. Still you can see access list number 100 gone, right? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Clear configure, clear access list. If I say clear access list 100, what it will do? Counters. I don't have the 100. See, if you wanted to clear the hit count, right? So you notice something called as what? Where is that? The hit count. If you wanted to clear the counters, then you have to issue the command clear access list 100 or name of the access list and then say counters. That means it is going to be clearing the counters. But if you want to remove all the access list, then say clear configure access. Don't ever, even by mistake, press enter here. Now what will happen? All the access lists are going to be cleared. So be sure what is that you wanted to achieve and what is the command that you are going to be using it. And especially when you are using the clear configure command, double check before you press enter. Okay? And as I said earlier, this is going to be your resignation letter if you are going to be using it. So if you don't use it properly, then this resignation letter will be accepted. Okay? Now, so the point is what? I don't have any, sorry. Same way, I can also put clear configure access group. Basically what it does, it is going to be removing all the bindings. Now, even after I remove this, okay, say let's try to open up a new session with 172.16.1.2. What happened? Where is my putty? The IP address is going to be 172.16.1.2. See here, I'm able to access. Even without the access list, I'm able to access it. But the moment I enable certain access control list on it, let's go to my ASA and then create an access list. Access list. See, in ASA, there is nothing called numbered. Okay? In Cisco routers, we have numbered access list. Am I right? We can have numbered access list. We can also have named access list. What is the key difference? Numbered access list are going to be identified through the help of a number, whereas named access list are going to be used to are identified through the help of a name. That is identification wise. Functionality wise, if you see that, it is meant for the same functionality. You can start allowing or denying the traffic, but editing a numbered access list wouldn't be possible, whereas named access lists are editable. Am I right? Hello? Okay. Now, in this case, if I say 100, does it means extended access list in this? There is no meaning for this, because even if you put a number, that is going to be handled as a name by Cisco ASA. 100 is not a number with respect to configuring an access list. Even if I give access list number 1, I gave the number 1, which means what? It's a standard access list in your Cisco IOS routers, whereas in ASA, it is not the case. See here, I can permit, then TCP, then source is any, destination is any, equal 80. So if it is going to be a standard access list, do I have protocol identification, source, destination and port number? It's not going to be happening. Whereas in Cisco ASA, right, there is no significance for the numbers. Even if you enter a number, it will be treated as a string. Then what type of access list that would be? By default, Cisco ASA will allow you to create an extended access list. If you wanted to create a standard access list, then you have to specify what kind of an access list you would like to configure. See here, I have something called as what? Standard. So by default, it is extended. But if you wanted to create something called as a standard, you can do that one. You understand what I'm saying? Hello? Is that clear? Okay, fine. Okay. Now that is also one more thing that you need to understand here. See, I'm just creating an access list, permit TCP any equivalent to 80. Now, I would like to deny TCP host 10.1.1.10. Okay, so 10.1.1.10 to host 10. The external is what? 1.1.1.1 EQ23. What I'm basically trying to do is access list number 1, which will be denying the traffic from 10.1.1.10 to 1.1.1.1 equivalent to 23. That means this telnet is not going to be allowed. Then I'm also allowing something called as what? 1 permit TCP host 10.1.1.10 to anywhere EQ23. This is the correct order, right? Sorry. This is the correct order, right? So I have denied the access from 10.1.1.10 to 1.1.1.1 telnet access, right? But anywhere else telnet access is allowed from the internal host. So this is the correct order. I can check this out. Show access list. Now I don't want this rule, okay? 10.1.1.0. It's a mistake rule. It's a wrong rule. There is nothing called TCP host 10.1.1.0. It's a network ID, right? I don't want this one. What I can do is I can simply remove. How do I do it? If I say no access list 1, typically what happens? The entries are going to be removed. Correct, na? But here it is not the case. But see here, I can say that I have an option to mention the line number. Line number, what is the line number I'm working with? Line number 3 I wanted to remove. Did I add the keyword extended? I told you already in ASA, by default extended rules are going to be created even if you are not mentioning it. But if you wanted to create a standard rule, then you have to be explicitly saying it. All I have to do is line number 3. Sorry, line 3. What is that we have? Okay. Right, now check it out. Only that rule is going to be removed. Can you see that? Same way, if you want to insert a rule, see, working with GUI is going to be simple. It looks so simple for you. But here, I'm just going to be doing something like what? An access list. One, let's say, deny host. Okay, let's say deny TCP host 10.1.1.10 to host 1.1.1.1 EQ80. But if I simply press enter, this rule is going to be added as a line number 4, correct? If this rule is being added as a line number 4, then what happens? Let's say, let me press enter, then create, bind this access list, access group 1, which direction? On the in direction. On which of the interface? Inside direction. So I have created an access list with an identification of 1 with a set of rules as well. What are all the rules? It says that rule number 1 says permit TCP any equivalent to 80, deny host from 10.1.1.10 to 1.1.1.1 equal to telnet, permit to anywhere else for the telnet, and deny access to 1.1.1.1 via HTTP. This is the rule I have associated to it. Because of this rule, what is supposed to be happening? Because of this rule, what's supposed to be happening? If I try to access, let me open up the browser. Before that, let's enable the HTTP access on it, on the router. Let me check it out. How do we enable HTTP access on it? Configure terminal, IP HTTP server, that's it, enough. Then I just need to create username, user1, privilege 15, password, user1, then AAA authentication, new model. Okay, I'm using an older version, that's why AAA authentication for login using do I have to do something? Okay, I don't need to do AAA, IP HTTP authentication using local database. This is what we do on routers. Is there any clarity required? So what I have done is I have enabled web service on R3 along with the username and password. I asked HTTP protocol to validate the credentials against the local database. That's what I have done. I think you must be familiar with this. If any clarity is required, do let me know. Now what I'm trying to do is, I'm getting into the internal PC and then trying to access uh, 1.1.1.1. I'm trying to access it. Do I gain access or not? See, it is asking for the username and password. User1. But according to my rule base, I'm not supposed to be having access to it. Can you see that? I'm able to access this. I'm just getting into the 15th level. I'm also going to say that archive, or I can get into the active mode, the global configuration mode, and then I can get into the interfaces. Where is that? EFGHI, or else I can change the host name. What is the name I wanted to? Let's say. I'm sorry. Let's say test. Okay. I can say configure mode, host name, test. Let me execute this command. Okay, now if I go and check the router, change it there. Can you see that the host name got changed from R3 to test? Do you understand what I'm doing here? I gained HTTP access to the router 3, and this traffic is flowing through my firewall where I have an access list which is not supposed to be allowing HTTP access to 1.1.1.1. That's what my fourth rule says. Correct or not? This is what my fourth rule is saying that. But this rule will not at all match because the first rule is allowing any source to any destination for HTTP. Correct or not? You can go and check it out, the hit count, and none of the packet would be matching this rule. Instead, you can see packets matched against this. But at the same time, if I try to telnet to 1.1.1.1, do you think I'll be having access? I'm not, because the second rule is denying the traffic from 10.1.1.10 to 1.1.1.1 for telnet. Hello? Do you understand what I'm doing here? Any questions as of now? Yes, exactly. Correct. Now, what is that we're supposed to do? We're supposed to keep this rule above rule number 1. Correct? Okay. Yes, correct. Access list, let me remove that one. No access list 1, line number 4, deny TCP. Right, I removed it. Now, if you go and check it out, you can see that the rule number 4 is not there. I think somebody is joining. Sridhar. Oh, he left, huh? I don't know when he left. Hi, Sridhar. You left? You left already? I didn't notice that you're leaving meeting. Okay. Oh, okay. Now we want to keep this rule. Which rule? Denying the HTTP access from 10.1.1.10 to 1.1.1.1. How do you do that one? I'm going to be saying access list number 1, deny TCP, host 10.1.1.10, host 1.1.1.1 equal 80. Again, if I do the same thing, this rule is going to be added as the fourth rule. But we wanted to keep this rule above rule number 1. So what I'm trying to do is, I can set something called, I can mention the rule number as well here. See, line number 1. If I do this one, basically what I'm trying to give the instruction is, I wanted to position this rule on 1. So any rule which is there in number 1 will be moved to the second position. Any rule which is there in second position will be moved to the third. So that's what is going to be happening basically. Now I have added it. Let us check it out. Show access list. Can you see that? What happened now? Rule number 1 is denying 10.1. Oh, again I made a mistake. It is supposed to be 10.1.1.10. Correct? That's okay. Now you go and check it out. Show access let. You can see that the rule number 1 is going to be denying. Right? The rule number 1 is going to be denying any in the TCP traffic from host 10.1.1.10 to host 1.1.1.1 if it is meant for port number 80. Now, if I try to access, let me say probably, see, earlier I was able to access, now I am not. Am I audible? Oh. So this is how you have to start working with it. But there is also certain thing we need to understand. But before we get into that, shall we have a small break and then we will start? If that is okay. So that you will also be getting some time to breathe. Because